In the name of the God who created us, in the name of the Christ who teaches us, in the name of the Spirit who journeys alongside us, welcome home, children of God. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Welcome to First Presbyterian Church this morning as we gather together as God's people in God's name. It's good to be here this morning. I welcome all of you here today. A couple of quick announcements. First, if you would please take a moment, sign those blue friendship registers on the inside. I'll pass them down. We would very much appreciate it. A reminder that we are actually live streaming this morning on Facebook and YouTube again. So if you are speaking in church at all, able to contribute some cookies or some chopped vegetables, please let Julia know. She's in the back here this morning. Would welcome any kind of help you available, and very grateful for it. We are also in the process of collecting and filling boxes for ARM, Thanksgiving boxes for ARM. Our church has a couple of different things we're collecting that's in your bulletin. There are boxes in the back and down, I think, either end of October or early November. I don't remember what's in the bulletin. It's not too late to bring in some canned goods for ARM for the Thanksgiving boxes in Capitol. Thank you. This is planned as a youth activity, but we would welcome anybody that wants to join. A week from today, next Sunday, the young people are going to go attend the Johnson City Symphony's Orchestra Halloween Spooktacular. It's going to be at the Milligan College Chapel. Tickets are, Sherry needs to know by Wednesday, I think, so we can give them an accurate ticket count and get tickets all sitting together. So it's a concert geared toward children. There's going to be wear your costumes. There will be trick-or-treating. There will be a costume contest at intermission, but anybody's welcome to join. We'd love to have you. One final thing. Today is first Sunday of the month, which means our Everyone Counts is Food for the Multitude. Just by showing up today, we are giving $1 for every person who is here today in worship, Food for the Multitude. We encourage you, as the offering plates go around, participate in worship, in that act of worship, by putting $1 in. Do that or not, just know that you showing up today does make a difference in the lives of this community. And so I think we're going to hear from some different people at church, and David Roan will be our first to share with us for a moment.
Thank you, Brian. This is my first opportunity ever to live stream. Church is important. Last Sunday, I had the opportunity to bump into Ross Spears out in the parking lot. He was picking up acorns. I don't know if you know Ross Spears. If you don't, he's a filmmaker for PBS, and he makes nature films, and he does a really good job with that. And he happened to mention that he felt like our church was keeping the message alive, whatever the important message was that we value. I hope that's true. It takes money to do this, and so as part of our stewardship campaign, we're going to be asking you over the next several weeks to reflect on what it is that's valuable about this church and what it is that's worth supporting, both with your time and with your pocketbook. Think about what it is that we represent that is worth your financial support, and we're going to
We turn now to our time of meditation, to this time of quiet interning. And our invitation to meditation today, and if you like, a seed thought for the week is Carnegie Hall. Carnegie Hall. So you've heard the old joke. There was a tourist in New York City who asked someone on the street, "How do I get to Carnegie Hall?" And the person replied, "Practice." That's what we're doing. That is one way of understanding meditation. I've asked a lot of people this, including just recently at our meditation gathering on Wednesday night. What are values you want to live by? You may not always live up to them, but what is it you hope to live by? One of them is acceptance, especially in this church. We want to be more accepting and less judgmental. Meditation is a place to practice that. As you accept whatever arises and subsides in your own mind control. We all want to be more aware, to live life more fully by just being more aware of life. Meditation is a place to practice awareness. It's in and out of awareness, and sometimes it's lost in thought, and then all of a sudden you wake up and you realize, oh, and you return to the meditation. You're practicing awareness. And I think we all want to attune to that one, to attune. Let's practice that. Let's practice that. And meditation is a time for practice that after meditation we can then arise and bring what we've experienced and bring what we've practiced and bring what we are to the whole world. So let that be our invitation to meditation and a seed thought for the week, Carnegie Hall. And with that, I invite you to close your eyes, and we'll begin by assuming a posture of meditation, because what we do with the body, we are doing with the mind. So as you're able, please sit erect and don't slump. You might even experiment with sitting forward in the pew a little bit as compared to reclining. But if reclining is more comfortable,
whatever you wanted? What made you think of such a thing? You haven't lied to other people, but to God." When Ananias heard these words, he dropped dead. Everyone who heard this conversation was terrified. Some young men stood up, wrapped up his body, carried him out, and buried him. About 3 hours later, his wife entered, but she didn't know what had happened to her husband. Peter asked her, "Tell me, did you and your husband receive this price for the field?" She responded, "Yes, that's the amount." He replied, "How could you scheme with each other to challenge the Lord's Spirit? Look, the feet of those who buried your husband are at the door. They will carry you out too." At that very moment, she dropped dead at his feet. When the young men entered and found her dead,
Thank you, Roddy and choir, for a beautiful anthem this morning. Carol, thanks for reading this morning. Appreciate it. So, when I first started kind of planning this series of sermons that I started last week and we'll do for another, I don't know, we'll see how long it goes, but at least 3 or 4 more, I think. Kind of a series on texts of terror. My idea was to take a few weeks and address the stories and the texts and the writings in the Bible that we are probably most comfortable pretending like aren't there. So, for example, I trust that none of us in here in this church this morning, none of us has any problem with women taking on a leadership role in the church. Deacon, elder, teacher, minister, whatever. But there are texts in the Bible, as you know, like 2 Timothy 4 that read, "I permit no woman to speak or to have authority over a man." We have a long tradition in this church of including people who identify as LGBTQ, like Romans 1, 26 and 27. Those are actually both topics we're going to be doing in the next couple of weeks. Next week will be, we'll look at the LGBTQ text of terror, and 2 weeks after that, we're going to look at women in leadership. And I'll share more about why a little later, but anyway, this morning, I was looking at these different texts of terror and thinking about which one I wanted to preach today, and then our very kindly Stewardship, Finance, and Personnel Committee Chair, Dr. Kirkwood back here, reminded me that today is also the start of our stewardship campaign, and gently hinted at how it might be helpful if the minister could incorporate something stewardship related in his sermon to start off the campaign. As it turns out, there is at least one text in the Bible that seems to be about stewardship, and probably should also, in fact, strike some terror into the hearts of anyone prone to heed biblical warnings. Story of this married couple, they've sold some land. I'm ecstatic. It would never occur to me to say, hey, you have more money than this, hand it on over. To have God, in fact, then go on to strike my benefactor dead on the spot. So it's a pretty gutsy move on the part of church leadership here, you got to admit. And Bill, I hope SFP is taking notes on this, by the way. A few hours later, Ananias' wife Sapphira. Peter asks her, is this what you sold the land for, this amount that Ananias told us for? And she's prepared with the same answer her husband had. She says, yeah, that's what we sold it for. Peter calls her out for her lie, and she too is struck dead there on the spot. So the lesson in this story this morning is quite simple. Fill out your pledge cards, and when you do, make sure that you are both sufficiently generous and that you don't lie about your income when you're figuring out what your 10% is, lest God strike you dead right here on the spot. Off gross income, by the way, not net. Methodists might get away with that kind of tithing on net income, but we Presbyterians have a higher standard. And so I'm going to pause here while you all fill out your pledge cards, and I'm just going to watch to see who falls dead out of the pew on the spot. It is difficult for me to say what bothers me most about this story. Let's start with the idea that God, or the Spirit of God, or the Holy Spirit, or whatever, is striking anyone dead on the spot. You all have heard me talk before. Capital punishment to me, whether meted out by God or by the state, capital punishment simply disregards the claim that every one of us is more than the sum of our mistakes, and that we are all created in the image of God and fearfully and wonderfully made. On top of that, Ananias and Sapphira are struck dead for not giving enough money to the church. Using the threat of eternal punishment as a fundraising tool for the church, by the way, if you don't remember your history, that was the final straw for Martin Luther. That's what led him to nail his 95 Theses to the church door in Wittenberg, Germany. The fact that the church was trying to scare people or coerce people under the threat of eternal punishment to give more money. So is that what we're really supposed to take away from this story of Ananias and Sapphira? Is that really what the early church was all about? There's also one more thing that really bugs me about this story. And it turns out I think it's the thing that also gives me a little bit more insight into what it might actually be about. Because when Peter asks Ananias, and then later Sapphira, about the sale of the property, apparently Peter already knew how much money they had made on the property. And so put yourself in the shoes or sandals of Ananias and Sapphira for a moment. And imagine if you have come in here on a Sunday morning. You have heard me preach one of the most amazing and erudite sermons you have ever heard in your life, just as you do every Sunday. That wasn't a joke. I don't know why you're laughing. And it comes time for the offering. And the plate goes by, and you drop some money in. Then all of a sudden, the usher taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, is that really all you're going to give today? I know what you're. I also happen to know that your birthday was last week, and you got that birthday card from your great aunt with the $100 bill in it. That's another $10 that needs to be going in the offering plate. Would you be bothered by that? I would. And I would because it feels like an invasion of privacy. It would feel to me like the church or the representatives of the church were crossing a boundary between my life in church and my personal life and my financial life. I've heard, to me, horror stories of churches that ask new members of church officers to hand over W-2s so that the church can compute your tithe and tell you what that is. Just like with Ananias and Sapphira, all of that feels to me like a church is inserting itself into a transaction that ought to be between me and God. And I suspect I'm keep different parts of my life separated from one another. As a minister, those lines between my financial life, my spiritual life, and my professional life, they have always been a little more blurred than I have been comfortable with. And quite honestly, in 20 years of ministry, that's always been a struggle for me. I mean, the way our church polity is set up, every person in the congregation knows exactly how much I make. It's published in the budget for everybody to see. You all voted on it when I came to the church here. In previous churches, when I've lived in a manse, it was even more challenging because all the utility bills would go to the church. And so there's nothing like showing up on a Sunday morning and having somebody question your utility usage. How long of a shower are you taking? Or, then the old joke that never gets tired for preachers of, wow, you're sure earning too much money for working only 1 hour a week. Those experiences of having at least part of my personal life and my financial life also be part of the conversation with my employer and with my church family, it's always been difficult for me. And I reflected on that a little bit more this week. And the fact that it is difficult for me, that it has always been a challenge for me personally, I think gave me a little bit of insight into why this story of Ananias and Sapphira bugs me so much. Because I value my privacy. I don't want everyone else knowing my business. And the kind of dynamics that we're talking